Hello, everybody. This is Deborah and my mom, Donna, and we are going to make a video explaining what an autism spectrum diagnosis is. We have lots of notes in front of us because I don't know if I can remember everything while I'm on camera. Apparently, I can't multitask. And Mom has some questions she's going to ask me, so why don't you start?
So can you read the official criteria for autism?
I can. In order to get a diagnosis of autism, you have to meet two main criteria. The first criteria is you have to have persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts. And then the next criteria is you have to have restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. And then there are some other criteria that you have to meet. So your symptoms have to be present from an early age because autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. We're born with it. Our brains are made this way. And so these symptoms should be present even in early childhood. But they may not become fully apparent until social demands kind of meet or exceed your capacity. The symptoms have to cause significant impairment in functioning, in social, career, or other important areas. And all of any mental health disorders, they all have this requirement that they have to impair your functioning in some way, which makes sense. And the criteria or the symptoms we're saying fit autism, they can't be better explained by something else. Because if they can be better explained by something else, then you should have that something else diagnosis, not autism. And everything in the DSM also says that if the symptoms can be explained by something else, then you need to look at that. Okay. Next question.
So when the DSM says difficulty with back and forth conversation, what does that look like in real life?
So when it says back and forth conversation, that means the conversation may not feel automatic or natural. Someone may struggle. I'm looking at my notes here, so I'm just going to be honest. Someone may struggle with knowing when to speak, how much to say, how to respond to somebody. Even if they enjoy talking, they may not know how to do the back and forth that's common in everyday language. Okay.
Does that mean they don't want to talk, or that talking just takes more effort?
So autistic people often want social connection, but that may be difficult for them. I think there's this myth or this idea that if you're autistic, you must be naturally introverted. And that's because many people misunderstand what it means to be introverted or extroverted. So introverted means that you basically recharge your batteries by being alone. Extroverted means you recharge your batteries by being around other people. So autistic people may want social interaction, but it may take more effort and energy for them. Sometimes that leads to fatigue or avoidance of social interaction. And I actually have an example from Big Bang Theory that explains that. So Sheldon Cooper doesn't have an official diagnosis of autism, by the way. But the actor who plays him and everybody who even talks about it kind of all agree he's probably on the spectrum. And they use a lot of things that he does as part of the humor of the show. But if you'll notice, if you've ever watched the show, he is very awkward. And sometimes he does things that are insulting to other people, but he doesn't mean it. He's not aware. He's not good sometimes at the back and forth. But he still enjoys socializing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have people over at his apartment or go to Penny's restaurant. So that's what that means.
So he can be friendly but still struggle socially.
Right. And he's a good example. He's friendly, but he's not always the best at socializing. He's awkward and sometimes rude.
Well, what does the DSM mean by nonverbal communication?
So when we use nonverbal communication, it means a whole lot of different things. So eye contact, a lot of people on the spectrum struggle with making eye contact, but there can be differences within that. So sometimes people on the spectrum can make eye contact, maybe with someone they know well. They just can't make eye contact maybe with every person they meet. Or they can make eye contact, but they can't maintain it. So there's a lot of looking away and looking down. So eye contact is an example of nonverbal communication. Sometimes facial expressions. So sometimes we'll be accused of having, I don't know how you call it, like a monotone, flat facial expression that never changes.
Right.
Sometimes tone of voice will not vary. So those are nonverbals that sometimes autistic people struggle with. You didn't know that?
So someone can make eye contact and still struggle with the social cues.
Exactly. And that's another part. Sometimes we use social cues just in everyday conversation to just understand what the context is of the conversation. But sometimes people on the spectrum aren't good at reading that. So they may not be able to pick up a person's tone of voice and tell that they're teasing. They may take what their person is saying very literally.
And so when the DSM mentions difficulty with relationships, does that mean they can't have them?
They can have relationships. It doesn't mean they have an inability to have them. It just means that relationships require more conscious effort and can be confusing or draining. So this is sometimes why people on the spectrum, even Sheldon Cooper, if you'll notice, he has this group, but it's not like humor of the show is about him making lots of friends and being socially outgoing. He does eventually get a girlfriend, Amy Farrah Fowler. Oh, God, I forget her name. And he gets a girlfriend, but if you've ever watched the show, it takes a long time for him to build an attachment to her, which is part of the humor of the show. Yeah.
When people hear repetitive behaviors, what are some less obvious examples?
So repetitive behaviors, some of the obvious ones are like rocking, which I do because it's soothing. I just do it. I've heard that some kids will do hand flapping, which I think I did a little bit, but not a lot when I was growing up.
I don't remember that.
Well, yeah, I didn't do it a lot. But other repetitive behaviors can be like vocal tics.
Okay.
You have one of those?
I do.
I chew my tongue, which the last video we made, I noticed that I was chewing my tongue. I could, yeah. So just different kind of stemming behaviors like that. Self-soothing. I bounce my leg up and down, twirl my hair. I'm trying to think of other ones that people have told me, like, oh, I never thought about that.
Talking with hands.
Talking with your hands, yeah. So there's a lot of different movements, but the difference is that they usually are something we do because we enjoy doing them, whereas like other tics, people will do and they're hurtful or damaging to themselves.
Why do routines matter so much to autistic people?
So when they talk about routines, they are talking about multiple things. So having an organized schedule for your day. Again, I'm going to use Sheldon Cooper. He's a good example.
Yeah, he is.
He really is. If you notice in the show, they go to the same restaurants. They have the same takeout every day. And it's part of the humor of the show that one time Leonard is like, all right, I'll take one for you, Penny. I forget what she did. She might have broken something of Sheldon's. And so Leonard says, you know how every Tuesday we have Chinese food from this certain Chinese takeout? And Sheldon's like, yeah, we do that every Tuesday. And Leonard's like, actually, we haven't been. He's like, when the store was going out of business, I went and bought up years and years worth of takeout boxes. We've been going over here. I've been putting the takeout in these boxes so you don't know the difference. And Sheldon is just horrified. His routine has been messed up. They use it in humor, but also routines can be internal routines, thoughts, doing the same thing every day, or needing to wear the same style of socks, or it can be routines. It helps with predictability. It brings comfort. It eases stress. So those are routines.
How are autistic interests different from hobbies?
So everybody has hobbies, and that's fine. Autistic interests are different because they are very deep, they are very focused, they are intensified, and they tend to be long lasting. So again, Sheldon Cooper has an interest in physics, right? Astrophysics.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever watched Young Sheldon, which I haven't, but I understand his interest in physics and science and astrophysics
Started at a young age.
Started at a young age. It's even in there. They're more than just hobbies, and they can last for a long time. I've had people who will cycle out of them, which I think I tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I've always enjoyed reading. We both have.
Oh, yes.
But when I say I like to read as a hobby, other people are like, "Oh yeah, me too." But they don't. They don't understand. Like, I don't know how to explain other than I liked to read when I was growing up, and that was the only hobby I can remember ever having. And if I could have, and I think oftentimes I did, I would just read all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And I could read many books within a day. I can't even put a number on it.
Yeah,
I could read so fast.
I've had a job interview ask me what I did to unwind and to calm down, and I said I read.
Which is what, and I still read, but what I read now is different from when I was a kid. It was a lot of fiction. Now it's a lot of psychology, and now I have a very focused interest in psychology. I'm a counselor. I'm going back to school for my PhD in psychology. So yeah, we focus on things for a long period of time. I don't know how else to explain it. Next question.
What does sensory sensitivity actually mean?
Sensory sensitivity means that the brain processes sensory input differently than neurotypical people. It tends to be more intense. So for many autistic people, look at my notes if you're hearing paper rattling. And they've actually done MRI scans on autistic brains, and so far what they're gathering is we tend to take in more information from our environment than neurotypical people do, and they think that this is why we have more sensory issues than neurotypical people, which I didn't know that. So because of this, sounds can feel louder, lights can feel brighter, textures can feel more soothing or more irritating, crowds can feel more overwhelming more frequently, and I think a lot of people assume sensory issues are an autistic person's way of being difficult or fussy, but it's not. It's a neurological issue because our brains are literally wired differently. Like our brains really do work differently. So that's the sensory sensitivity.
So why can everyday places feel overwhelming?
Everyday places can feel overwhelming because I don't know how to answer that, honestly. Because if you're wired differently, then it doesn't matter if you're going into a place you've always been. If you have had something that gets you off your routine for that day, then things you might have been able to normally handle, you're already stressed out. They're just going to overwhelm your brain.
So
and then if you're in a sensory environment that you are normally in every day, but something about the sensory issues change, maybe there's a crowd and there wasn't usually a crowd.
Could be.
That, so these environments, to a neurotypical person, they probably think, well, this is the same thing we do every day and this is the same environment. But autistic brains notice details that neurotypical brains tend to not notice. And I believe that because I think you are more detail-oriented.
I am detail-oriented.
I think I'm more detail-oriented. So, next.
So if autism starts early, why are some people diagnosed as adults?
So, this is what we think is going on. Number one, before 2013, the criteria for autism were different. And what my understanding is that previous requirements for autism is that you had to have an intellectual developmental delay. Well, guess what? We don't. We're smart. We're probably quite smart, actually. So that
I like to think so anyway.
Right. So therefore, we wouldn't have gotten an autism diagnosis. In addition, before 2013, they combined like Asperger's into there was Asperger's, which basically was like a high functioning average intelligence autism. Then you have pervasive developmental disorder. And basically, after 2013, they combined all of these into the autism spectrum. So that's one reason. Our criteria have changed. They were different back in the day. And then two, a lot of the early research, and I mean decades of research on autism, were done primarily on boys.
Right.
And we realize now that boys with autism present differently than girls with autism. And so our thinking is that our current criteria and understanding of autism isn't completely correct, because we're expecting behaviors that are actually maybe male behaviors. And so as a result, I'm saying that females tend to get missed.
Okay. That's figures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does clinically significant impact mean?
Clinically significant impact means that autism may make it difficult for you to socialize. And think about it. If you can't socialize, what is it like going to school and being in class where you're around people every day? You're around fluorescent lights. You're a loner. You may not make friends. And then think about that. If you're a loner and you can't make friends, you may have problems with depression. Mm-hmm. And then if you're forced to go to a school where you have to sit in a classroom and there's all these sensory issues going on in addition to being around a whole bunch of people, you may be very socially anxious.
Especially if you're forced to do PE or something like that.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. God, that's awful. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example. And then as an adult, if you have these other requirements of getting a job, it may make it harder to get a job.
Yes, I realize that.
And that's just one example. So clinically significant impact is a person might say, well, you're depressed and that's hard, but you're still able to go to work and make friends and come home. And, I'm not going to argue that that's wrong, but I get that. But clinically significant impact means it hurts areas of your life. It is it's considered a disability.
So can someone look successful but still struggle internally?
Absolutely, because again, going back to the differences between male and female and how our current criteria were created, what we are learning, and we're only just now learning this, and that is that women are much more likely to mask, which means they're going to hide their behaviors. So if you're bouncing your leg, this happened to me once. I was in school, I was bouncing my leg, which granted was making the other tables and cabinet rattle. And I had someone go, stop, and like very dramatically attack my leg. Then I learned, you don't bounce your leg when you're around other people. Or you mentioned rocking and have someone say, stop, you're making me seasick. Then we learn not to rock. So we learn what not to do because we don't want to get called out and made fun of.
Right.
And so, yes, you can be successful. You've just learned to internalize everything because you've learned you can't show it.
So why are women often diagnosed later?
I think we've already gone over that, but really it's because women probably are socialized to care more about relationships. So we tend to notice like what people are doing and saying. Probably we're more aware of nonverbals. So we just learned to hide it better. And because we have learned to hide it better, it's just not being caught until later. And again, the criteria for autism changed. And so I think since 2013, I think the numbers of adult women being diagnosed with autism has just tripled. It's just gone through the roof. It's a big trend.
So why do so many adults say their life makes more sense after learning they are autistic?
Well, and I think, again, many people are misdiagnosed. You yourself said that you were often told and often believed yourself to just have a problem with shyness.
Right.
And you probably did have a problem with shyness. But if you've been given a hard time about being sensitive to lights and not being able to look people in the eye, and if you get overwhelmed with crowds, you're probably going to be shy, and people are probably going to call that stuff out, which is going to make you more anxious. So it's, see how it kind of layers? Yeah. And so anyways, to answer that question, once people find out, suddenly you understand like, oh, I could never make eye contact because probably have autism, or I have to wear certain fabrics because I have autism, or suddenly you look over your life and like, oh, that's why I had this. People were making fun of me for this, but I couldn't control it. Turns out you're not weird. or defective, you just have autism.
Hmm.
So, did that help?
That helped.
All right, we're going to turn this sucker off. Maybe.
Did they hear you say that?
I don't care if they did or not. Again,